All right, for everyone watching this at home on YouTube, we're joined today with Orangeville Police Chief Wayne Kalinski. We also have Staff Sergeant Jason Folz from OPP. We have one of our great community assets, Phil Dewar, and also another great community asset, Simran Bhamu. Thank you for joining us today. So, you know, the past couple of weeks have been very interesting coming out of the George Floyd incident in Minneapolis, and it's caused a lot of discussion around the world. And so I thought it might be a good idea if we could have a discussion here about you know, touch on racism a little bit, and also talk about police and their training, use of force, and maybe some discussion about how we can make things better going forward. And I think we're all in favor of that as well. In every part of our life, we want to try and make continuous improvement. So, so I'm wondering if we could start off maybe with Phil and Simran. You know, you know, we've heard this term white privilege. You know, I've never in my life felt, you know, eyes on me as you folks might have in your reality. And I just wanted to ask you to give a little, you know, explanation maybe about your reality as people of color, and how you're treated in this community. I think I don't see a lot of racism, but I know it is out there. And Simran, do you want to maybe share some of your life with us, and what, you know, what you feel needs to be done maybe to correct things going forward? You're muted, Simran. Yeah, it's okay. There you go.
So as you said, we were talking about white privilege. I think in a way, at some point or the other, we all live that privileged life until one of those incidents happen to us in one way or another. If we face discrimination or racism or any kind of discrimination, be it whatever, because of the way you think, because of the way you speak, because of the way you eat, because of the way you dress up. It could be in discrimination in any form, at workplace, or if you are watching a game, it could happen anywhere, or it could be just because you are a certain gender. So I think we all live a certain life of comfort until and unless we are put in a situation where we have to personally experience such a thing. And one of those moments was for me when I put myself in a position where I was receiving a lot of public opinion. And then suddenly I realized that, you know, I am different. And until then, I was just living a life of privilege where I was very ignorant about what somebody who looked like me, the same skin color, who spoke like me, could have faced the kind of difficulties in life. But because I hadn't faced any of those, I was not aware of how deeply it can impact somebody, or it even existed in the community. I was very ignorant about that until it happened to me. And I think, as you said, we don't have a lot of racism in this town. And we only realized, or rather, I only realized it when I was meeting a lot of people. When you knock on 11,000 doors, you realize the kind of opinions you are opening the doors to. Right. And that is exactly what happened. We all are different people, and we might have different opinions about other things, and which is a good thing. That is how we progress as a community, as a society. But as long as these comments or these opinions are not coming from a place of hate, not coming from a place of ignorance, I think that is what matters. Like, you know, we all have, isn't love a natural feeling? It comes to us as humans, it comes to us more naturally than hate. And I think that is what we forget at times. And it could be a reason of ignorance. And it is a very small community. And most of the people, pardon me if I'm not correct, but I think most of the people who have said those kind of comments, or who have shared those kind of opinions, I think they have never really traveled. They haven't really seen other cultures. And it is coming from a place of ignorance more so than hatred.
Right. Yeah, you're right. We're products of our environment, aren't we? And so the more widespread your experience is, the more likely is you're to accept other cultures and other people. So thank you, Simran. So Phil, how about yourself? You you've lived in Brampton as well as Orangeville, I know, and tell us a bit of your story and what you feel about racism in our community these days.
Mm. So Simran, you bring up some great points. I want to say that in my experience, maybe contrary to yours, I believe racism exists. I think that oftentimes the media cycle will give us, a lot of US or United States versions of what's going on. So we understand that it's probably less, or it's not as inflated, or not as uh, overt as you would see in the United States, or blatant. But I do believe that um, there is a racial undertone in Canada. I do believe that there is a racial undertone in our very town of Orangeville. And I do believe that people experience it in different ways. You know, we speak about it as something that's always going to be glaring, but we have to understand and we have to educate that it's not always that. There's a covert way that it happens between hiring practices, who you're going to rent your basement apartment to, um, who's more likely to be pulled over. There's a lot of things that are happening that isn't, the George Floyd, and to perhaps ask you to say not incident but murder. There's a lot of things that are happening, and in my experience, we've felt it in this town. I ran essentially a our establishment, a restaurant with a very firm and a very regarded cultural backdrop, and we've had people who have, you know, risen up against that, or not wanting to see that level of success, or we've sat in rooms where people have spoken or misspoke about situations. And so I would say that it is alive and it's well. And I would agree with you that sometimes it's ignorance, but sometimes it's people wanting to have their cake and eat it too. And I say that to say people want to come to, let's say, a restaurant like mine and have the cultural experience and try the different foods, but won't rent their apartments to people of color. They won't let daughters or sons date outside of their particular background or heritage, or they have prejudiced thoughts towards a group or a community. So they want to go to Jamaica on vacation and scream, yeah, man, but they don't want the whole. They just want to take a piece that they want to enjoy in the privacy and in the comfort of their own way. And so I believe that I would consider that racism as well.
Right, right. Been thinking about this, when we're all born, we don't have any of these thoughts, and so all of it is learned. And, I think our school systems need to focus a little bit more on this and give us maybe better tools to deal with this, and give us better, more expanded cultural experiences and racial experiences in the school system, and let us, fight back against our parents, maybe in their preconceived notions, as you said, Phil. So,
well, speaking to that, even as Orangeville has grown since I've been here since 2000, the year 2000, between that and 2000, say 5, 6, even 2009, since 2009 till now, we've seen the demographics of the town change a lot. And if you keep an ear and you keep abreast to these community bulletin boards and these talk chat rooms, you'll hear a lot of those references, or the city people are coming, or again, it's a covert way of saying, that people of color and people of different ethnicities are moving up here, and why would there need to be a different Muslim association, and motions who wanted mosques built have created all kind of backlash online and stuff like that. And so you understand that in the hearts of again, in the hearts of men and people of the community, that it's still something that exists. And so again, to your point, I feel that it does exist, and it's something that we have to actively fight. I think the notion that it doesn't exist as much or it's okay, and I don't think that that's the right approach. I think that people have to be actively looking out for it in the boardrooms, in the council chambers, and in these places that you allow people of color to have a seat at the table and have their opinions, share their experiences. And when decision making is happening for 35,000 people in a town, there needs to be representation from all of the people of the town.
Stakeholders, all the stakeholders.
Stakeholders, yeah.
I would just like to add a little bit to what you said, Phil. I completely relate to what you're saying about the representation of people of all backgrounds, because what year are we in? 2020, and there are times when I still go to events and I look around and I am the only person of color at those events. I'm not saying that, because of course there will be the ratio of the population representative. And if the minority groups are only 2%, 7%, 8%, there will be less of us. But if people claim on one hand that all the city people, what it means when they say city people, when all the city people are coming here, then why are they not at these events? What is stopping them from participating in these events? You know what I mean? And suddenly somebody like me, as I was saying, that when it comes from hatred or from ignorance, whatever it is, and even if it is a minor racial slur here and there, why do I have to even worry about even a minor incident? Why should it happen at all to begin with?
Right.
So absolutely, we need to watch out for each other, whether it's happening to me, my neighbor, or whoever, and we all need to speak up against it.
Yeah. Phil, you made an interesting point there about the changing demographic. I moved here in 1992. This was a time when Orangeville Mall was still a fairly vibrant indoor mall. And I remember my wife and I going there, and every other man was wearing a Kenora dinner jacket. If you guys know what a Kenora,
no idea what that is.
A lumber jacket, the red and black plaid one.
Right.
I'm not kidding you. Every other man was dressed like that, and we'd laugh driving home, saying we are in Hickville here, because we moved up from Toronto, and so from 1992, I would say the redneck quotient was very, very high. But the mix of new people into Orangeville over the past, in my case, 28 years, it's changing. People are learning. There's still that underbelly, though, that I don't know if those people will ever change. But fortunately, they're dying off, and new people are coming in, and the demographic is changing. So there was one thing I just wanted to share with you. I was looking at some things online. This was Bishop Desmond Tutu. If you're neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor, right? So we can no longer, when we see, overt or covert racism, we need to call it out, because, we need to shame people, and that, I think, will help change society. It's going to make for some loss of friends, I think, and some difficult things. But I think this conversation that seems to be happening now, particularly in North America, is a healthy one to be having. It's a shame that Mr. Floyd's death occurred, but it's really a really interesting and fantastic talking point to get us here. We are, we're having this discussion. Without that, we wouldn't be having this discussion. It's pretty interesting what's been said so far. So thank you. So Chief Kalinski, you've been here working for about 10 years now in Orangeville. I think you've probably seen the racial dynamic changing even in that short, relatively short period of time. Just wondering if you could share with us some of the thoughts of Orangeville Police Service and the training maybe that police officers get. I know, there's a police college that you go to. I'm sure there's sensitivity training and things that go on there. And can you share with us some of that, and maybe also touch upon the other serious concern that came out of the George Floyd death and murder, as Phil, I think, has correctly called it, and that was neck restraint and the use of force in that way. And is that something that police services are going to look at going forward?
Well, let's get that off the table right away with the neck constraint. That is not something that is condoned by the policing community. That is something that happened. However, we have never been trained to utilize that technique, and that is totally illegal as far as I'm concerned, and the policing community in Ontario. Right. So we have ways that we restrain people, but we do that in a way that is practiced within the policing community in Ontario. It's taught, it's practiced, and it's done in a way that people will comply, but they will not be injured.
Right.
I have been here since June 2011 in Orangeville, and this police service in Orangeville is we practice inclusivity. We embrace our community. That's our business plan. We try to understand. We empathize. We sympathize. We support, and we are as inclusive as we possibly can be, and want to be part of our community. So we form the mosaic of our community. At the end of the day, because we're still a smaller community, after 4 o'clock at night, everyone goes home, and who do you call? You call the Orangeville Police or the Ontario Provincial Police, because there's no one else there. Everything closes up. So mental health support is something that is large in all communities. We get calls on a almost daily basis to someone that is suffering an episode, and the only entity that's available is the police, because at the end of the day, there's no one else.
Right.
We want to be as reflective in our community as all possible. We are involved with our groups in town of ethnic persuasion, whether that's Indigenous, whether that's South Asian, or whether that's LGBTQ. We try to understand. Do we get it right every time? No, but there is a respectful way of how we, the policing community, need to deal with our public. And I'm very comfortable and confident in saying that we've made some significant changes in Orangeville so that we do respect the community the best we can. We don't always understand culture, and that may impede us from time to time, but we're learning. We always want to improve, and I acknowledge that there's racism in our community.
Right.
Flat out.
Yeah.
When we talk about training, everyone as a new recruit attends the Ontario Police College in Elmer, Ontario, and there's certain training that we receive in levels of diversity, racism, empathy training. Generally speaking, that training gets updated as times change, as opportunities change. We have training in principles of fairness and equity, compliance with the Human Rights Code and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. All basic constable training programs follow that particular principle. Also, the individual police services within the province of Ontario are mandated to provide training each and every year, whether that's use of force or academic. And I can tell you that the carotid restraint is non-existent in our training because we just don't do that.
Right.
Doing that is an area that would receive swift discipline, and we're not going to go there, period.
Excellent. Okay, Staff Sergeant Folz, the OPP has been involved in some unfortunate incidents with Indigenous people as well, and I know that racial and diversity training is something that is through your organization. Can you maybe share with us what type of training and your thoughts about use of force that we saw in the death of Mr. Floyd?
Well, we can talk about the use of force first, if that's okay.
Sure.
I think that what we witnessed there and what we continue to witness when we watch the local media and the news at night is that American ways of doing things are quite different than what we've been trained and what we do moving forward here in Ontario. And it differs even from province to province. But Ontario, with the Ontario Police College, we are all trained the same and receive the same level of use of force training as far as restraints. And in my 25 years, I have not been trained on or even seen people use a carotid restraint or anything around the neck. Like the chief said, it is off limits for us, and so. In that sense, it's not the same as what we're seeing then down in the United States. As far as moving forward with our Indigenous people and our Indigenous partners, police services that all work together with the Ontario Provincial Police, I think we take each time as a learning opportunity and apply our training and update our training based on lessons learned. And I've seen a lot of that, from Caledonia moving forward, and the different training that we've received as far as Indigenous awareness training and being respectful and honoring the Ontario Human Rights Code the way that it was written, and that all people are to be treated equally. And I think we all can have some accountability and whether that's whether we're passive when we don't say anything about racism, or whether we become involved. And I've even in my 25 years, I've changed the way I've been doing business, and am much more vocal now about situations. And whereas maybe a young officer I didn't become involved, and now I will insert myself into those situations. So I think it's a learning process for everybody, including law enforcement. I mean, the law enforcement is a cross section of our communities. That's how we do our hiring, and we are getting members of the community represented in your police services, and that's the way it happens. And I think we can work together and work with our community partners to get better. And I think that's the long and the short of what we need to have happen is we need to get better, and we need to have an atmosphere where we can.
Right. One of the more disturbing parts of that video that we watched with the Floyd death was 3 officers essentially watching it happen. And police forces are quasi paramilitary organizations where there's a hierarchy, a reporting structure, and I don't know if the gentleman kneeling on that guy's neck was of a higher rank than the other officers, but it just seemed that they should have intervened in that situation. And I'm just you mentioned the United States is different than Canada, but would a lower ranked officer be chastised for stepping in a situation like that? Or is that still, a concern that we must face down? Sergeant Folz? Yeah.
I think, well, I feel, and I've witnessed, we have people more and more speaking out, and wrong is wrong no matter who's doing it. So, my sense would be that even junior officers would be expected to say, hey, not cool. And we're seeing more and more of that.
Yeah. Well, I think I think
it's less about rank and more about maybe time on and experience, and maybe people feel, or those officers certainly felt, that they didn't have the knowledge base that the senior member there did. But I would suggest that anybody that I would train moving forward would have an opinion and voice it.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point here, learning point for all police agencies, that if somebody sees something going wrong, they need to step in, right, and make issue with it. So, you know, one of the things that we're talking about is, you know, proactive versus reactive things. And, you know, Chief Kalinski, you talked about mental health. We've got substance abuse and behavioral disorders. If you could remove all of those people from your daily incidents, you'd probably be like the Maytag repairman sitting at home drumming your thumb on the desk. But so how do we get to those people before the criminality kicks in? And you know, I feel that we need to put more resources into mental health in advance of people acting out. And I don't know if you share that same feeling, but it certainly seems we don't have enough time or energy or resources put into mental health issues and drug and substance abuse issues, which are, you know, can be considered a medical problem as an addiction rather than, you know, a criminal act. And we need to get at that and treat it in such in that way. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I fully agree. And those calls that we attend for mental health crisis or drug overdose or an occurrence of that nature, it's not criminal. It doesn't involve the police. Who are you going to call? You're going to call the police because there's no one else to call. And as a result, we have to be mental health counselors. We have to be familiar with our medical, our first aid, because there's no one else that's going to attend after 5 o'clock at night. We've referred 73 people or 73 incidents to the situation table thus far this year. We're only halfway through the year. And we have been able to divert 60 people to various resources. But truth being told is we're the only ones there to call in the middle of a night in a crisis or on the weekend or first thing in the morning. And our response is to ensure that person is safe and take him to a place of safety, and that is usually the hospital. And we are at the hospital on a very regular basis, as are all the services in Ontario. Police services, they have a relationship with the hospital, and we've worked towards mitigating our time at the hospital. But the reality is most of our calls are not criminal nature.
Right. Sergeant Folz, if I could just move over here for a sec to you. You know, something I just learned in the last week or so was this idea of mobile crisis rapid response teams, which are social worker, police officer teams that can respond. Are you aware of this, and is OPP doing some of this work? And what is a success level for this in stopping, you know, criminal acts maybe before that gets into a serious situation?
Well, we work these in conjunction with situation tables, trying to identify with our community partners areas that might be of concern moving forward. And we try to identify them before they become a crisis and getting a call in the middle of the night. Now, we have brought in, and many of the detachments have embraced the mental health component with an identified officer and a mental health worker who then follow up with cases that the case isn't over when we've decided we drop them off at the hospital and that's it. Now we're following up and trying to make sure people are, you know, on their meds, staying on their meds. You know, how can we assist before we get 10 more calls for service, you know, later in the week, because that's what happens. And the chief's right in that the first call that's generally made when people are at their height of psychosis is to the police. And we come and attend, and we're everything in that moment until we can get that person to a place of safety. So it does work quite well with referrals. to Canadian Mental Health and whatever other services they might require, or and identifying who those community partners are, and giving them the number, taking them places, assisting before it becomes a problem. And I think that's we're making great strides as far as that goes, to not just be reactive, but let's be proactive, and it may ease some of these calls for service, and these ones that happen in the middle of the night when there is nobody else to call. And quite frankly, those are some of the worst ones that we get.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad to hear both of the police services in our area are, there to fight racism. They're also there to make sure that people are restrained in a proper way, and that what we saw with the George Floyd incident is not part of the use of force training in Ontario. So that's a very good thing. I'm glad to hear that. I think we have a fantastic police agencies here in Orangeville and in the OPP surrounding area, and hear nothing but good things about both agencies. So I'm really happy that you've joined us today and taken part in this. But I think there really needs to be some more mental health resources at the hospital level, and more mental health professionals brought to our area. It's really these mental health professionals are in the big centers. They're in the big city, and they're not easy to access here. So somehow we've got to work with our new Ontario Health team and try and bring people out. So we're getting on here to almost 40 minutes now. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I'm wondering if we could go around the table here one more time and just give you each an opportunity to say a few more words about racism, interaction with police, and your final thoughts. So Phil, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I guess my question would be to both agencies, Staff Sergeant Folz, is I guess what we're hearing from you is that from both agencies is that you guys haven't seen this displayed in any of your forces. Is that correct?
Sorry, this display, I mean, you're talking racism?
Any display of racism in your force, in your force or your direct dispatchment or precinct, have you seen at any given time where there was a racial or prejudicial bias displayed in any situation?
Well, I can say that I've certainly seen it in my career. We make great strides to tell people it's not okay, and to identify those who have those kind of views. And
Right.
And the other thing is to look after yourself and make sure that you're doing things in a way that's reputable and professional, and having those professional interactions. And it'll only go to other officers and see that this is how we do business. This is not the other way. So have I seen it? Yes. I think we're making strides, and I think I feel that we have more work to do. And those can come with community partners and further training, and weeding out the people who have those views, and identifying them, and that's what we can do.
All right. Are there currently deterrents in your OPP or in your particular precinct in terms of policy or disciplinary acts that would discourage that kind of behavior outside of your fellow officers identifying?
Yeah, absolutely. We have respectful workplace policies in place, all based on the Ontario Human Rights Code, and certainly our people who investigate our folks internally are aware of these and are looking at those as they come up. So the thing about police officers, especially in the province of Ontario, we have to abide by the Police Services Act, and we can be charged based on the Police Services Act, whereas other citizens can't be. So we do hold people accountable and identify those people.
Sure. Chief
So,
Kalinski?
Phil, I've unfortunately seen it in my career. It was never condoned. I can say in Orangeville, we have developed policies and procedures, and most and foremost, my expectation of how an Orangeville officer will conduct themselves. We have specific direction to our staff through our policies, such as our Code of Conduct, the Charter of Rights and Freedom, the Ontario Human Rights Code, discrimination policy, hate bias crime policy, vulnerable people policy, and we have equal opportunities for all members of the organization. So I think between the staff sergeant and myself, we have this covered through our policies, procedures, and expectations.
Mm-hmm.
We continue to monitor, and I can tell you that we are all we're all respectful police officers.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone doesn't adhere to those particular policies or that expectation, that will be dealt with through professional standards, but that would be something that would be shocking for me to see in Orangeville, because they know how they need to respond to respect our public.
Mm-hmm.
If we have a policy, or if we have a procedure, or if our business plan says we're community focused, then that doesn't mean selective community focus. That means in all aspects of how we represent ourselves, helping our public. Because at the end of the day, that's what all police services do. We help our public.
Right. So that being said, is there perhaps, like, as the community is changing and the force being, as you've said, an extension or a representation of the community, do you feel that, right now your current force is either represented with, minorities, women, people of color, or, particularly Black folks in that fight, in your particular group of employees right now? Are there any Black officers? I understand that the deputy is a female officer. Are there people of color currently working in our precincts? And if not, how do we go about making sure that, there is a representation? So if, for example, you're dealing with someone who comes from a cultural background, maybe there's a level of interpretation or a level of understanding or empathy that would go into that interaction when you get that call?
I can tell you that it's always been a challenge to be as reflective of our community in Orangeville as we should be.
Mm-hmm.
Recruiting has always been a challenge here. We can do a lot better than what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
We can only empathize with people of color and show respect whenever we have that opportunity, but we don't have that reflection in our community, in our police service right now.
Mm-hmm.
We can do much better.
Is that something in your power to do, where we say, look, we're holding these last 2 spots for, this particular demographic? Is that something that's within your power to do, or is that considered another act of discrimination against, who is better qualified for the job?
No, unfortunately, it's just who wants to come to Orangeville as a police officer that we have to accept. At the end of the day, we're always looking for additional officers who are reflective of the community. It's a matter of we can hold spots, but if we don't have them applying, then there's always an opportunity if someone comes along of the right moral character, wants to be a police officer, that they could be hired. It's just a challenge getting them to Orangeville and getting them to come to recruiting.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had outreaches, but we haven't been as successful as I would like them to be. I came from a large organization where we were very reflective of the community, and I wanted to build that in Orangeville that has been one of the challenges, I must admit.
Understand. Thank you for answering my questions. I asked that because, especially in the PL force with the large East Indian communities, with the language barrier and cultural barrier, there's a definite push to hire people from that background and from that culture, so as to mitigate any level of misunderstanding or, again, language and cultural differences when you do get a call. So I wonder if that's something that we would actively, as in going forward, make sure that I'm sure if we push hard enough and we understand that we could make that difference to have an officer which would reflect people of color or any minorities in our force. And I would encourage you yourself, and as we transition to the OPP too, to make that push. And thank you for answering my questions.
Great. Okay, Simran, your last kick at the can here. So can you share
Sure.
some further thoughts? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Phil, for asking most of the questions that I was thinking about. But I have one more question to both of the people that we have online today with us from the police forces. It is for the people who are listening to us right now, residents who might in future be a witness to an incident of racism, or somebody who's themselves a victim of racism in the moment. We are all emphasizing on how each one of should be raising our voices against racism. So is there anything that they could do legally for that incident specifically?
Staff, I'll defer to you.
I figured. Well, I mean, speaking out, there's no harm in speaking out and speaking your mind. The entire Human Rights Code covers everyone. And I think you'd have to be very, very specific in your scenario to be able to answer that with any kind of level of accuracy. Or do you know what I'm saying? I think that
let's say it's just a racial slur. Somebody calls me whatever name they think I would represent demographically, and I don't have any specific particular physical endangerment in the moment. I don't have a physical threat. So how can we, and if this person is known in the community to be repeating it over and over again, how can we as a community, or you as a police service, stop this person from doing it over and over again?
Well, certainly we could utilize the criminal code and look at certain areas of that statute, as far as criminal harassment, or even if we move into the realm of hate crimes, and start an investigation and see. And it's an ongoing thing, then it's something that certainly the police can be involved with.
All right, thank you so much.
I mentioned this earlier, and that we collectively have to start shaming these people, right? I mean, as a white person, I don't understand all of your reality, but if I see overt racism like that, we can't just snicker and look the other way anymore. We have to actively comment on it and shame those who are doing those things. So that's my thoughts. So, gentlemen, Chief and Sergeant Folz, Staff Sergeant, wind this up for us. Can you give one final statement, Chief? You've had a fantastic career. It's winding down now. I know you've appreciated your time here in Orangeville, and we thank you for everything that you've done for our community. So, thank you.
Thank you. As an organization, we want to be respectful of all citizens of our community, and we want to ensure that everyone has a safe environment in which they live and work, and we'll continue to do that. And we appreciate the opportunity to serve our community.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Staff Sergeant, final words.
Final words. I think that we're all in this together, and I think that all the right people want to do the right things, and I think I really feel that working together with our community partners and our citizens, we can weed out any kind of racism and get better. And at the end of the day, that's what we want. We want to serve the citizens in the province of Ontario and get better, always improving.
Great. Well, thank you to all four of you for taking part in this. I think it's a very important discussion that we've had today, and it was very interesting, and I'm sure those who are going to watch this are going to be thankful that you all participated. So thank you so much.